Welcome to my True Scary Story YouTube channel. I want to welcome you all and ask that you subscribe now and comment on my newest video to introduce yourself. The Sinful Society is very welcoming and are some of the nicest people on YouTube. I narrate for you guys, and I want you to share your true scary stories with me so I can feature your scary story on an upcoming video. Cheers to the freshest horror content on YouTube. Be sure to email me your true scary story at thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. The link to my email will be in the description box below as well. Enjoy. This occurred to me and my girlfriend in the summer of 2004. I need to provide a bit of context first, so the context will be the first little bit of the story. My hometown was decimated by flooding from Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Part of the response and recovery efforts involved FEMA setting up RVs as temporary housing for those whose homes were either destroyed or heavily damaged. These RVs were set up in previously vacant fields outside of my town. The park was dismantled by 2001 or so. They put up fencing around the perimeter and trenched over the other streets into the area to keep people out, but they forgot one entrance or left it purposefully open for emergency vehicles to have access. Some of my friends had found this entrance, and we frequently used the area as our playground. We would go back there to set off fireworks, turn the streets into a race course, and have sex with our girlfriends. To set the stage of how this place looks, there were 3 streets running east-west orientation, a street that went around the other streets in an oval fashion. The grass was very overgrown and about 4 feet tall. The north and south side of the area were wooded. The east side had large dirt berms that were about 20 feet tall and had been placed there when the site was graded in 1999. They normally provided a climbing challenge for our SUVs. This particular day, my girlfriend and I were parked on one of the east-west streets, amongst the tall grass to remain hidden. We got undressed to have sex in the back seat of my car. As we began to have sex, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, and there was a man coming over the 20-foot-high dirt berm. He's wearing denim overalls, and in his left hand is a full-size axe. A wave of fear washed over me, and I yelled out, "Oh my God!" My girlfriend pops up to look out the back windshield and let out a scream and a, "What are we going to do?" I frantically start looking for the car keys. There is a pile of clothes on the floorboard and I can't find them. I look out the back and he's getting closer and closer. I can see his face now, and it's emotionless with a blank stare. I start grabbing clothes and shaking them to hopefully find the keys. They pop loose and fall to the floor. I grab them and immediately jump into the driver's seat, still completely naked. I start the car, and from the back seat my still naked girlfriend screams, "Go!" I look in the rear view mirror as I'm putting the car into drive, and he's now within 50 to 60 feet of the car. Same blank look, but staring at the car with the axe still in hand. I didn't even fasten my seatbelt, and I'm still fully nude as I floored the gas, kicking up rocks everywhere as the tires spun as I sped away from this man wielding the axe. We got out of the abandoned FEMA park as quickly as I could drive the car without crashing. My girlfriend was hysterical the whole time until we got back to the main road and were safe. We stopped about a mile up the road on the side of the road to put our clothes back on and de-stress. I don't know where this man came from, as there are no houses within a mile or so of the old FEMA site. He seemingly came out of nowhere. I also did not see any other cars on the site, as I had done a lap around the park before we chose our spot. I'm not sure what his intentions were, as he never said anything to us, and I know he saw us panicking in the car. Whatever his intentions were, I know they weren't good. The look on his face and the axe in his hand made that abundantly clear. I went back with a few friends a few days later and found no place this guy could have been lurking, and there were no signs anyone had been camping there either. To this day, it's one of the scariest events I've ever been through. Whoever the Axeman was, and whatever he was planning, let's not meet. I was working my first ever job in retail. I was around 20 years old, and it was a busy morning around 9 a.m., somewhere mid-December, hence why it was so busy. I was working the checkouts as per usual, scanning items, ringing up customers, and all that jazz. About an hour into my shift, I was serving an elderly man who bought just a handful of items. After giving him his subtotal, another guy behind him, smelling of booze, stretched out handing me cash. I kindly told him I wasn't serving him. I was serving the man in front of him. Then I looked down and saw he was buying some cheap knockoff brand of Bailey's, and of course I figured out this man was wasted. Just as I was taking payment from the elderly man, I was planning in my head how I was going to tell the next guy that I cannot sell alcohol to him as he is already drunk, as this was my first job and I never encountered this sort of thing before. I finished serving and now on to the drunk guy. I looked around in hopes to find another colleague or manager, but no one was in sight or available to help. So I looked at the man, and just before I opened my mouth, I felt like someone grabbed a fistful of my hair and something sharp poked me in the back. And of course a man whispered into my ear, to which I also smelled alcohol on his breath. "Serve me, mate." He pushes, which I'm assuming was a knife, harder into my back. "Now." In complete shock, I said nothing, just scanned the bottle, took the cash, and they were gone. I quickly turned around to my colleague working checkouts behind me, but all they did was look at me and asked if I was okay, completely unaware of what just happened. I went on my break. I saw my manager pass by. I rushed over to him and told him what had just happened, and all he did was laugh, because he thought I was joking, but criticized me for selling alcohol to someone under the influence. This happened 9 years ago. I just ended a 4-year relationship, moved into an old building in downtown Paris. I had to start all over again from scratch. I made the mistake to let my ex-girlfriend keep a lot of my furniture, kitchen, cutlery, pans, and coffee machine. At the time I worked as a waiter, so I only could afford a 1-bedroom apartment from a council estate building. It was old and barely clean, but at least it had a roof. The first 2 weeks nothing happened, but quickly I began to hear someone talking at night. It was mumblings. It basically said, "Go and die already, already, already." When I looked into the door, I saw a scrawny, shirtless guy smiling and scratching the door with his finger. That became a thing. Every 2 or 3 nights he came and threatened me through the door or sang songs with a childish voice. I might have opened the door and asked him what he wanted, but I was afraid he had a knife or something, and I couldn't see his hands while looking into the door. What stunned me is that he acted totally normal when I stumbled upon him during the day, and denied being the one who did this at night. I even got mad at him, but he seemed to genuinely not understand. One day I came home with the girl I met at the bar I was working at. For some reason she left during the night, and I went back to sleep. The mumbling started again, only this time it felt very close. I opened my eyes only to witness a scrawny neighbor headbutting the wall and singing what sounded like a mix between religious chants and a lullaby in slow motion. I honestly was paralyzed by fear. I tried to communicate with him, but he was just grinning and ended up exiting my apartment by himself. I decided to call the police that very night. They took him, but he went straight to a psychiatric ward. This man had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and put in a psychiatric hospital. He wasn't supposed to live at his place anymore. He just ran from the hospital 2 months ago, and they only signaled it without investigations from the police. He initially got sent to the psych ward after bashing a shovel onto a postman's head, putting him in a coma. He did that for absolutely no reason. I never saw him again. I moved out 2 years later. This happened in 2005 during Christmas vacation. I moved away for college and came back home to visit for the holidays. I spent a week in my hometown in a snowy state. On my last night there, my friend and I decided to go sledding at 3 a.m. We get into a car and both go down a few times. We're both at the top of the hill. She gets ready to go again, but I stop her suddenly. She asks what was wrong, and I tell her that I just had a bad feeling. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up and I felt nervous. I told her we need to leave now. We drive back to my family home. We lived in town where no one locked their doors. The crime was almost nothing, and all the neighbors knew each other. When we got back, something told me to lock all of the doors. I checked the windows and several of them were left unlocked. My flight was only 4 hours away to go back to campus. I maybe caught 2 hours of sleep that night. I wanted to see the snow and smell the fresh air, so I stepped outside. I looked at a huge pine tree we had in the front side of our yard. I always thought the way snow laid on the branches looked so beautiful, and then something caught my eye. What should have been pure fresh snow was littered in huge man-sized footprints. They wrapped around the tree and went towards the backyard. I was thinking maybe my uncle had been out there smoking or something. Just thinking of anything to rationalize whose prints those were. The same feeling came back to me when we were sledding. The anxious and paranoid feeling in the pit of my stomach. I look to my left and I see a man. He is running. He's sprinting, staring straight at me. He was probably close to 300 pounds and 6 feet tall, and for his size he was super fast. I froze in fear with realization he's not just doing a morning jog, and he's coming for me. I tried to move several times, but I was almost too scared in the moment. With everything in me, I opened my front door, slammed it shut, and locked it. I ran to the window and looked out onto my porch, and the man was standing there. He had his hands on my door. He turns his head and I follow his gaze to a man in a white van. The guy in the van throws up his hands in a gesture to say, "Well?" The runner just threw up his hands and shook his head. The runner walks back to the van, gets in, and they drive away. My heart's still pounding. I wake up my friend and make her walk around the house with me. There we find footprints that went to every door and window around my house. My friend tried to rationalize it, but to me I know if he had reached me, I wouldn't be writing this post. The malicious look on his face as he ran to me told me everything. Years ago, man, I'm old, but let's say mid-1990s, I worked as a woodland firefighter while in the Army Reserves. I worked as a spotter. Basically, I was stationed in a giant fire tower in the middle of a national park. My job was just as it sounds. I would use binoculars and look out for fire, smoke, other telltale signs of fire. My nearest compadre was 5 miles or so away from me. My days consisted of working my shift, taking long walks around the fire tower, and being on the lookout for anyone who might be up to illegal activity, looking out for wildlife, and staying afoot of bears and wolves. The way our shifts worked back then was 1 week on, 1 week off. So we slept in the towers, cooked our food, and there were also nearby toilets and showers for us to use. One day I came across an illegal bear trap. I had several ranger friends and I safely set off the trap, then picked it up to take it to the ranger station on one of my treks out for food in my Jeep. Poaching is illegal in the park and carried a big fine, even back then, as well as jail time, but it did not stop poachers from trying. I heard rifle shots and headed back for my fire tower. We did have a rifle in the tower to be used in cases of emergencies. Just a few months back, a fellow spotter had been mauled to death by a grizzly, so each tower had been outfitted with a rifle. I looked in my binoculars, but did not see anything out of the ordinary. I radioed my coworker Ben, an older guy in the adjacent tower. He hadn't heard anything today, but had come across a few traps himself. That night, after dinner of franken beans and toast, I was writing to my future wife when I heard the rumbling of a truck. Thinking it may be Ben, occasionally he made the trek over. We could crack open a soda and chew the fat for a bit. Instead, I saw 4 men with rifles get out of the truck. One looked around and leaned up against the truck while the other 3 grabbed traps and began to set them. I grabbed the rifle and my lantern and headed down the stairs. I was only 21, a farmer's son from rural Virginia farming town, and even with 1 deployment behind me, I was naive. I should have called it into the ranger station, but instead I thought I could talk some sense into 4 dangerous men. I barely got a "hey, what are you doing" out of my mouth before I was roughly shoved by rough hands. My lantern fell and I heard it crack. The rifle was kicked away from me, and I felt the breath leave my chest when I was violently kicked in the stomach. I barely had caught my breath when I was grabbed by 2 of the men and was shoved forward into the woods. It seemed like we walked for miles, but in reality it was probably only 1 mile. I noticed that there were no sounds, and the forest is rarely silent. It is a cacophony of sounds even at night, owls, the wolves, crickets, but on this night, nothing. Suddenly I was shoved onto my knees, and I felt hot tears welling up. I thought of my parents, my little sister and my brother, and my fiancée who was back home in Virginia. I heard the rack of a gun, shut my eyes and prayed. Suddenly the night erupted. However, it was sounds of sirens, those of forest rangers, and behind them in his pickup, Ben, who had tried to radio me that he heard a car's engine, came over to my tower when I didn't reply. The poachers were arrested. Ben drove me back to the tower. I was still shaking. He didn't lay into me for not following procedure. He just said, "That was close, kid." I ended up leaving the job months later to take a job closer to my home, but I never ran into any more poachers during the rest of my time. I kept in contact with Ben for a while, sent him a wedding invite and then a photo of my firstborn in 1997. However, as time usually does, we lost track of one another. A few years back I Googled him. He would have been 75 or so, to discover he passed away a few years back. Don't know whatever came of those poachers, but I know I never want to meet them again. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please make sure to leave a like on this video, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. Still no stories, each and every day going by. Where are you guys? I don't get it, honestly. You guys are great about commenting, but no one can send me a story. I'm not trying to complain, just being honest. It's really hard to take from the subreddit only. It really limits what I can give to you guys as far as content. Till we meet again, stay safe, send your stories, stay sinful.